Welcome to this new series of intimate interviews with interesting people you'll find here on the Isle of Arran. Some have lived here all their lives, while others have settled here after exciting adventures in the wider world. What all our interviewees have in common are fascinating stories to share. In this series, you'll get to know them better, perhaps seeing them in a new light, as we shine a spotlight, and our cameras, into their past and their passions. This episode of Islanders Reveal All is sponsored by Arran Online, the new website and app that puts the island in everyone's pocket. Here you'll find every trade and service, and visitors can book accommodation, restaurants, and discover things to see and do. It's completely free to download and use, and local businesses can list themselves free of charge. Today I'm in conversation with Charles Currie, who, having spent all of his holiday time on Arran as a child, moved permanently to the island to take over the running of his grandfather's farm when he was just 20 years old. It's also where he met his wife, Irene. Apart from a brief spell in Aberdeenshire, Charles has lived on Arran ever since. Charles has achieved much notoriety in his life, and we'll hear more about that as he shares a few insights and stories with us from his varied life and career. Some of his many jobs have included marketing manager for the National Trust in North Scotland, tourism officer for Arran, and community journalist and DJ at West Sound Radio. So let's just dive straight in. Hello, Charles.
Hello, Gloria.
Well, let's just start with Arran. So I understand you spent all your holidays here as a child on your grandfather's farm. What was that like as a childhood and as a young farmer from the age of 20?
It meant it really was stuck on the farm because we worked most of the time. We occasionally got to the cattle show or something as a big event, but it was only when I became tourist officer later in my life that I actually got to walk the mountains, because I'd never been up Goatfell. I'd never really done much up the north end of the island. It was very much stuck in Blackwaterfoot, which was limiting perhaps, but when you're in God's own country then you don't care.
Well, that's right, and there are certainly worse places you could be stuck.
Certainly, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your role as the tourism officer for Arran. That sounds like a really interesting career change.
It came about at a strange time. I was doing weddings and discos on the island, and when I sold the farm in 1987, I was at a loose end and I was working for West Sound more or less full time, and I was sharing the boat with the chairman of the tourist board, and the tourist officer had left, and he was having to go into the tourist office and answer the letters and things because the staff didn't want that responsibility. So I said, I'll take it. I'll go in and just open letters for you for a month or two, and then you can get a new tourist officer. So I went in and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed meeting the people, enjoyed talking to the customers, and when the job came up I applied for it. And one of the other people who applied for the job was an ex-owner of coaches who had a travel company.
Yep.
And they gave me the job, and the next week in the banner there was a letter from this gentleman saying, Arran has got no ambition whatsoever when they appoint a bog-trotting disc jockey as the tourist officer.
Well, that's an interesting description.
Yeah, so I've kept that. So I'm a bog-trotting disc jockey. But once I was into tourism, it opened up other avenues. Visit Scotland were developing their exhibition programmes, and we were doing shopping centres in England. And my DJ background helped me do front of stage, talking to the people. You had all the stalls with parts of Scotland, and I would go in with a band and we would talk. And I invented the world's first indoor Highland Games.
Oh, wow.
And we got the shops in the Metro Centre to compete.
Fantastic.
Then we did a tour of England with various Calmac and various other companies, and we did one in Bournemouth. I always think my accent is easily accessible, but after we did the Bournemouth show, a man came up to me and he said, that was fantastic, he says, your enthusiasm for Scotland really comes forward. He says, but I just wish I could understand a single word you say.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, I worked in Kent for a while, and my boss at the time was from Glasgow, and the people we used to go into a meeting, and my colleagues, when we came out, say, "Did you understand a word of it?" I said, "Yeah, I understood all of it," but I think it's quite a hard change, isn't it, from Scotland to the south of England, actually. So I think that's an issue.
I went to a posh school, mainly because I was at Bellhouston Academy in Glasgow when I was 5 to 9, and Govan High burnt down, and a third of the pupils were from Asia, Pakistanis, Indians that had come into Glasgow after the war.
Yes.
And their second language was English, so my mother thought, he's going to be held back. So they sent me to the high school, and I came out of the high school speaking very properly, and became a farmer down in Arden, and suddenly I'm speaking like that to people around here. So my accent went downhill rapidly, until the stage where Whiting Bay asked me to act in a play for them in the summer, and they said, "Oh, we were wanting something slightly posher. Could you take elocution lessons?" So to get my accent back up to where it was.
Brilliant. So you had quite an interesting job at one point as the Arran postman, I believe, or the postie.
I started first in Glasgow. I got made redundant from Ayrshire and Arran Tourist Board because I told my bosses that the area tourist board was top heavy. There was too many managers, so they took me at my word and made me redundant and made another person redundant at the same time. So I was up in Glasgow and I thought I better do something. So Christmas was coming and I went and worked at the mail centre in Glasgow, sorting parcels, which was a great job. And then I thought, well, I might as well carry on and be a postie. So I went and asked if I could become a postie and was a postie in Glasgow for a year and a half. And then I got invited back into tourism in Aberdeen. So I left it again. So when I finally left Aberdeenshire to come back to Arran because my mother and aunt were getting old, I thought, why don't I become a postie again? So I applied for the job, didn't get it, and then waited 6 months and applied for it again and did get it. And I had 7 really happy years.
So you must know pretty much everyone on Arran then.
Well, there's one section from the castle on to Loch Ranza. I never delivered there at all. I've done the whole of the rest of the island and enjoyed it. In fact, in the south end, I was cursed with the other posties because I always had a bag of gravy bones. And every dog in the south end would get a gravy bone. So if they saw the post van coming, they would be up jumping on. And my colleagues were not quite so keen on that. But the history of posties is my great-grandfather was a postie and my great-great-grandfather was also a postie. So my great-great-grandfather got a medal from His Majesty, who's Victoria's son, Edward VII.
Yes.
Which for 30 years as a postie.
Wow.
And
so you're handing that down the generations now, are you? Or your children not got any aspirations?
My son works in media, so he hasn't got any plans on that. I don't think my daughter has either. But I thoroughly enjoyed it because it's a job with a beginning and an end. It's not something where you carry something over to the next day to worry about. You go in the morning, there's presented with mail, you sort that mail, you put it in a bag, you take it, you deliver it, your day's finished.
Although, in the pandemic, I think it's been a fair challenge for the guys because everybody's ordering everything online.
Yes, it's becoming a parcel industry now, and it's and in that we're probably fortunate that in Arden that the posties still get Amazon because in the mainland Amazon are delivering it themselves, which would reduce it's not as easy as folks that are just driving around the island putting letters in. There's a lot more to it than that, and the guys work really hard. But I enjoyed my time. I took my time. I talked to people on the way around. I learned from other people that you're sometimes the only person that person's going to see in a day.
Absolutely.
And you go in and you chat. there was a guy called John Anderson up at Auchengallen who was very, very near the end of the Shiskin run. And if I went in to deliver his letters, he would kick the chair over and I'd sit down and he'd regale me with stories about his father ran the Anvil tea room and up in Pyrmill, and talking about the war, talking about all the things that he did. And it's fascinating. It all goes in there. It's like a sponge, and hopefully I'll be able to use some of it.
Well, I have to say that sometimes when the postie comes round to ours, if I've only had my husband to speak to all day, I'm really, really grateful to speak to the postie.
Yes.
And she's lovely.
She is very nice
lovely.
Indeed. You've got nice postie.
We share cake stories because she's always going and buying from the Honesty Box at the farm in Kilmorey.
Well, I've only been bitten once by a dog in Arden, but the worst I ever had was in Glasgow. I was in Minard Drive and I was delivering, and it was one of the big curse for posties is low down letterboxes. They should be banned. And I was putting my hand through this letterbox with a letter, and a cat stuck its claws into my fingers. And of course I pulled and it ripped it.
Ooh, painful.
Yes.
And so I notice you've had a fair few career changes over the years. What would you say was the standout career? You know, have you got a memorable one? And if you could have one of those again, which one would it be?
I liked farming, but a lot of people would say that I wasn't a great farmer. I depended upon my wife's uncle who worked with us for a lot of the stuff, but I enjoyed radio presenting. Probably was the most, because I was totally in control. I produced it, I wrote it, I chose the records, so that was my total control.
Okay, and so farming, what kind of farming was it?
It was hill cattle and sheep. Unfortunately, my sheep used to disappear on a regular basis because I had a blind shore over in near the King's Caves, and certain people in Kintyre who liked sheep, obviously, came and took them. So I was losing maybe about 5% of my flock every year. But money really wasn't in farming, and I don't think that I could still be a farmer. I don't think the economics of it were there.
No.
It took me 25 years to realise I was a disc jockey that farmed for a hobby instead of the other way around.
And of course, today the announcement was out there about Australia getting a trade deal, and of course the farmers feel that that's going to be against them.
It is, yeah. What I feel about farming is that the state has to support it, because we all like Arden the way it is, and we probably the rest of Scotland and England. If farmers are not there, the land will return to wilderness. And I don't think people want to come and see a wilderness. They like to see a well-regimented green fields, cattle, sheep, horses, whatever, in these fields. So farmers have to be supported. And as they found out at the Second World War, that if you don't do it, then when you need it, it's not there.
Absolutely. And it's not as if people have got large gardens and plots of their own now to be able to do that. I mean, those have been getting smaller over the years, so we do need it.
People see farmers. I tell when I went down with friends to London to go to Smithfield Show, and we stayed in a B&B and we walked a few miles, took a tube to Earl's Court. And outside Earl's Court there was 5 or 6 Bentleys, and folk would say that was a farmer, not the guy who's gone down and stayed in a B&B and gone to the thing. So people's conception of what a farmer is that they're rich. I can assure you that it's only the very few that are rich.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say I've spent some time on the farm doing the sheep shearing and the lambing, and it's hard work, and I think they earn every penny. But quite a change to being a DJ, I'd say. So I'm pleased that you enjoyed that. I mean, what was it about that? Were they pre-recorded programmes or?
I started doing discos when I was 17, and we formed Shisky Disky when I was 18. I enjoyed playing records that folk would dance to. The folk come up and look through your record box and say, this is rubbish. And I say, probably most of it is, but it's what makes people dance, and that's what you're there for. You're not there to play wild Pink Floyd tracks or anything like that folk can't dance to. You're there to play music for folk to dance to. So being able to put a set together, I enjoyed that. And the natural progression from that was when I was invited by West Sound to do a programme, that I move on and do it on radio.
Brilliant.
The only problem was that your listener on radio actually regiments what you do as well, because I tried to change the format of my programme after 2 or 3 years, and the listeners rebelled against it. You're there, same as the dance, is to make people enjoy what you do.
And you're right. I mean, we know that some fairly big names in BBC radio have had the same issue, haven't they, over the years, where they've changed the programme and people haven't liked it, and then they've had to change it again. More recently, that's happened.
Ken Bruce is the exact same age as me, and I think he's got a formula and he sticks to it. He doesn't try and invent anything new. He just talks away with his Scottish accent and plays music, and that's what you want.
And does Popmaster.
Does Popmaster.
Brilliantly.
Yes.
Yes, I don't think I've managed to get above 12 yet on that.
Oh, I think I've managed to get 36 points. I've never got to the 39, but
wow.
The problem is, since I stopped doing discos, is that modern music is passed me by, perhaps, and I can't tell my Beyonce from my Rihanna.
Well, I can't tell my Black Lace from my Birdie song either, so there we are.
We even do the dances.
Can you? So, I understand you were also an award-winning actor at the Arran Festival, no less.
It's taken me 30-odd years to be given an award-winning actor, and even then it's only a support actor. Remembering my words is the most difficult thing nowadays, but fortunately in this play I played the... I can't even remember what I played. I played the narrator. So I had my book with all my words written on it, and one of the other actors complained that I get an award for reading.
And what was the play?
It's a thing about Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and many, many princes. It's a comedy, one-act comedy, and there is various princes try to come and waken up the princess who's Sleeping Beauty, and none of them succeeds because none of them are really princes. But it's a very, very funny play, very funny.
Well, it certainly sounds like it's a good fit with Islanders Reveal All, actually.
Yes.
Yes. But your talents aren't limited just to the stage. So moving to screen, I understand there's a few insightful moments on the primetime Irish TV. Is there anything you're allowed to tell us about with that?
Well, we happened to be in Ireland on the 25th of January, which is Robert Burns's birthday. And my friend knew somebody that worked in RTE and got us onto the Pat Kenny show, which is a kind of Graham Norton type
Okay.
magazine programme.
But without the red chair.
Without the red chair. Mm-hmm. And the programme we were on, the Irish entry for the next Eurovision Song Contest was on as well. So mm-hmm. I was told I had to go on, do one line of Burns, drink the whiskey and get off again. Okay. So my friend and I went on, and my friend carried the whiskey on in a silver tray, mm-hmm. which meant the glasses were... So I was so worried about him dropping this that when I had said the first line, I couldn't think of how to get out to the last line, so I just kept going. So we had, instead of having 2 minutes, we had 10 minutes in this show. And then we each took a whiskey. Pat Kenny took a whiskey. I went Slange, and my friend went the haggis, which just as I put my thing. So the whiskey went into my mouth, yeah. And I pursed my lips and spat it over the host, whose makeup started to run down. The next day we were walking through Dublin. I wasn't even wearing a kilt, and a bus stopped next to me. The doors opened. They said, "I hope you can keep your whiskey down today."
Brilliant. Oh, I love it. And have you ever been invited back?
We weren't invited back. The producer said that I did it deliberately and that I wasn't welcome in the Pat Kenny show anymore.
Oh dear. So can we just go back to your time at West Sound on air radio? You must have met some really fascinating characters.
Is there
any you can tell me about?
Yeah, there's some great characters in radio. And there's also some people that are not quite so good. I was sent to do a lunchtime show in Irvine at the opening of a new double glazing company.
Okay.
And the host, the owner of the company, didn't arrive till the last 5 minutes of the show. So there was myself and the engineer doing a show, interviewing the staff for 2 hours with music in between.
Right.
And it wasn't open to the public, so there was no public there. And the man walks in with 5 minutes of the show to go, and I go up to greet him and call him by the wrong name.
Male or female?
Male.
Oh, that's
It
right.
wasn't quite so bad, but there's some good people in radio. That I remember I invited an MP who was a Tory at the time, but to come on my programme, and he said he was far too busy serving the constituents.
Okay.
So I invited all of the other candidates for the election hadn't been announced. So each of them came on and they talked about their policies and we chatted about their personal lives. And then, after I'd done the last one, it was announced that there was going to be an election. So we got a phone call from the sitting MP to say, "Oh, I want to do your programme now." And I said,
Oh, well.
"Certainly, but of course, under Purdah, we'll have to give each of the rest of them another go."
Absolutely.
So he didn't turn up.
Oh dear, and you said he was a Tory at the time?
He was, yes. He probably still is.
So, can we just sort of ask a little bit more about the Shisky Disky? Because I quite like the sound of that, and I'm just interested to know, how did that all start then, and are we going to get any more of them?
Well, we've had 50 years, and I just do the occasional one now, and only for raising money for the hall. It started when I was 16. There was a dance with the local Shiskin band, which was drums, accordion, fiddles, and the young folk rebelled and said, "We want to finish the dance with records."
Okay.
So they got a dancette, and they tipped up the dancette, put a few records on the thing, and danced away to that. And we thought, that's a good idea. So when we went to the mainland, we got an old joiner friend of mine to build 2 decks, and we had a switch which switched from the amplifier to a small amplifier which would give us headphones, so we could... and we did fill-ins in Glasgow for bands, because nobody could afford 3 or 4 bands anymore. So the following year, I approached the hall. I was then 17 and my friend was 16, and we said, "We'd like to hire the hall." And they said, "What for?" I said, "We'd like to do discos." So it built from there, and we reached the stage where we were doing it 2 nights a week through the summer, and you were getting 150 to
Amazing.
maybe 200 people. And the reason we started on a Wednesday night was that Alistair Billsland has been doing dances in Whiting Bay, Broddick and Lumlash Sunday, Monday, Tuesday,
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So it was the only night that was free. So we gained a following over the years, and eventually the kids would hire the bus themselves to come over to Shisky Disky,
Fantastic.
which was great. And it was actually one of the young girls that came who asked me to do the lockdown Shisky Disky, which Facebook shut down after an hour. But we got feedback from all over the world from folk that had been to Shisky Disky.
Fantastic. And so, a bit like Burns then, really, isn't it? It's got sort of international appeal then, by the sounds of things.
Yes.
And is it true that you are on the run at the moment, having been shut down by Facebook?
Yes, Warner Brothers and Sony are still after me.
Fantastic. So we're not going to get a Shisky Disky anytime soon then?
It's all right doing it in the hall. It's just broadcasting that's the problem. I have talked to the Kinloch, and we have rumours of perhaps having a disco in the field when all this COVID stuff's over.
Oh, I shall look forward to that.
See if we can just bring the village together. During lockdown, a lot of people were playing music out of their windows and things to cheer up the folk in the village, and the tractors went round. If we could just bring the whole thing together and have a wee dance and a wee celebration that COVID's over, it'd be great.
That sounds great. We might have to check on the weather for that one.
I would just get wet.
I'm up for that. So, can I just turn a little bit to writing? Because I know you're quite into your writing, and I understand you have a hand in a new Robert the Bruce book. Is there anything you can share with us about that?
It's a tale about my grandson, which has bits of truth in it. When my dogs were just 2 years old and my grandson was 4, I took them a walk and they spotted an otter and ran down off Drummadoon Point and jumped into the sea. And I'm trying to stop my grandson from walking down on the seaweed, and I went down, and I thought I could maybe do a story about this. And then there's a signpost at Drummadoon Point, which is a large rock. Now, if that rock were to turn and there was a lead round it, you could find yourself in a space and time portal.
Brilliant.
So
that
my grandson disappears into the 14th century, gets captured by the troops of Robert the Bruce, taken to the cave, and he encourages Bruce to watch the spider, which explains the line. So how he gets back to the present day is the difficult problem. So I've actually worked that one out.
That's quite good. So, we do have a lot of standing stones on Arran, as you know.
Yeah.
So that, I know there's a bit of similarity with something else that's been on the TV, but that could maybe be an option.
Outlander Arran. Yeah.
Am I allowed to say that? It's one of my favourite. I'm just hoping all the characters are going to be wearing kilts.
Well, I'm not sure that... Yes, certainly Robert the Bruce's men will be wearing kilts.
Excellent.
It's also it's aimed at kids. It's an opportunity to show what the golf course would have been like in the 14th century with run rig systems and other farming, and the story does involve a lot of history.
Yeah, because it's not a time in history that is often talked about.
No,
so it is. We tend to go back to about, say, the 1700s, but going back to the 1400s would be interesting.
It's history's always been an interest of mine, and I find it interesting to put it in a way that kids would enjoy. Yes,
brilliant. And just staying on the writing side, you've got all sorts of stories, I know this, but if there was a funny story that you got the opportunity to write about, what would that be?
I started my writing. I go through school and come out of school with a C in English, and I've never really got over that. So I let my humour take the control, and I started writing for the Arran Banner. For 20 odd years I was doing the football column, which had nothing to do with football. So I think I would like to be a private eye writer and write stories, taking the truth and bending it.
Like it. Brilliant. But with a focus on Scotland, or? Anywhere.
If it's funny, it's funny.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. One of the Fanatic stories was that the year after the Scottish rugby team had damaged the Calcutta Cup, the ladies from the RNWI went to visit Tutankhamun's relics on show in Edinburgh in the museum. When they got there, they had a great day, they came back. So I wrote the following week in the Banner that 2 of them had taken a priceless artefact and dropped it, and that they were going to be banned forever from the Treacle-Scone competition. So just to get that one joke in, you make up a whole story.
Love it. That sounds like worth a read.
Yes.
So you should definitely write that.
What is even better was that the Banner does a 20 years ago section, and it pulled out that section and put it without any comment 20 years later, saying that these women were banned from the Treacle-Scone competition, which just appeals to me.
Yeah, I like that. That's really brilliant. And so, just talking a little bit now about, I know you're quite interested in genealogy, and you have traced your family tree back. How far have you traced back? And has there been anything surprising or interesting that you've uncovered so far?
The fact that, on my mother's side, all of the people that I've found were born in Tiree. None, no incomers or anything. And on the Currie side, there are probably only about 4 or 5 people in 300 years that haven't been born in Arran. But the one I did find, it's not Currie, he's a MacGregor, and he was the innkeeper at Cladach in Brodick. And the Duke asked him in 1745 to take a letter of support up to Bonnie Prince Charlie. Now, he, being quite a wise man, being my ancestor, he saw the way the wind was blowing and he put it back in his pocket and came back down to Arran and gave it back to the Duke, who was so grateful. He gave them farming land in Balnacool in Shiskin, and his son had 2 daughters who married 2 Curries, and that's what the connection. And he's my oldest relative in the graveyard, which I think is
amazing. And was that the farm that you farmed? No,
Balnacool was things turned a bit bad in the early 1800s, and the son's wife, who was a McAllister, was moved out of the Balnacool area, so they made it one big farm, and she cursed the Allens who took over the farm and said that they would never have any sons, and they had 7 daughters.
Oh, so it worked then.
Whether that was actually written after he had 7 daughters or before is up for conjecture.
Well, I'd like to think it was written before.
Yes. Yeah.
So if I were to look at your bedside table, what's the current book that you're reading at the moment?
At the moment I'm reading a book on DNA genealogy by a man called Sykes, who is Blood of the Isles, which I found fascinating. I've always been interested in where people came to Britain from. There's a southern route and a northern route. And the Anglo-Saxons are the northern route and the Celts tend to be the southern route. But they did come from the same earth, and he does show that the English and Scots, DNA-wise, are very, very similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a fascinating book, actually, and it talks about the fact that I think most of us are actually Celts.
Yes.
Which is interesting that we have so much division sometimes, isn't it? Yeah,
there's so much division that folk think there's Anglo-Saxons and Celts, but we're all, as they say in Scotland, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns. And you also get Iceland, for instance. You'll find a lot of DNA from Scotland in Iceland because the Vikings picked up their wives in the Western Isles of Scotland and took them to Iceland. And so you'll find, if you go down the female line, that a lot of the women there and men have got Scottish DNA.
Wow, so it's not true then that we're all Germans?
No.
Because that was in a recent article in the Daily Mail that said actually everybody in the UK is really German. I don't think that's the case at all.
I don't think it's the case. Apart from anything else, Germany is a child of the 19th century, isn't it? Except that it wasn't there before. It was all these Saxony and all these different areas. It wasn't actually.
That's it. And
German.
given how long the Romans were here, it doesn't sound like we've got very much from them.
Well, I don't think as of today, there has nothing been found in Arran which leads us to believe that the Romans were actually on Arran, although they were very much in Ayrshire. But not to say that they weren't here, because the seas were more important than the land as far as moving around, so Arran's a very strategic place.
Well, it's a fascinating book. I have to admit, I did a little bit of looking at that after you mentioned it to me. So Brian Sykes and The Blood of the Isles.
Blood of the Isles, excellent book.
Yeah, fantastic.
I recommend it.
And a really easy read as well.
Yes, it's not highfalutin. It's also not jumping back and forward. I've just read SPQR, which is about the history of Rome, and I found that they went far too much back and forward in the ages. I want a book that has got some line of continuation on it, and that's what Sykes' book is. Yes,
I agree. And he's written several. He's written The Seven Daughters of Eve.
Yes.
So he's written several books, and I think
that's my next read.
Is it your next? Right. Well, we won't spoil that then for you. Okay, just switching for a minute. I'd just like to know if you had absolutely nothing that you had to do on a particular day or weekend, and nowhere you had to be, no responsibilities, where would we find you, and what would you be doing?
I would be listening to my Bose, probably playing Harvest by Neil Young, the album, and reading a Denzel Merrick book. Denzel Merrick is a Scottish writer who sets all of his plays in Campbelltown. And his latest one, he only does one a year. And yesterday I finished his latest one, which came out last week. And so I would make it so that I had a constant supply of Denzel Merrick books and read them.
Perfect. So if you don't mind, I've got a few quick fire questions. Let's just see what makes you tick a bit. So first of all, where's your favourite holiday destination?
My favourite holiday destination at the moment is that might change is Playa Blanca in Lanzarote. We used to go to Gran Canaria, but we found it became so commercial and you had touts and all that. Playa Blanca still holds that feeling of the 60s that there's a relaxing, nobody hassles you, and it's also some great walks because it's surrounded by hills and there's a volcano in the middle of the village, and it's just a fabulous place, and there's great places to eat. And once you go back again and again, you try out a new place, but you go back to old friends rather than going into a restaurant. You know the families of the people, and it's a really relaxing holiday.
So it sounds a bit like home from home, but with the weather.
With the weather, well, this year I can't complain so far, apart from the fact it's a bit cold.
Well, that's true. So I have to ask you this one. What is the favourite flavour of Arran ice cream?
Well, I was going to say vanilla, but I'm a great fan of rhubarb.
Oh.
And very occasionally he makes a rhubarb one.
I'm going to have to look out for that, because it's rhubarb season at the moment.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of rhubarb, right back to the days when you get a stalk of rhubarb and a bag of sugar, and I just used to lick it and stick it in and eat the rhubarb. I just love rhubarb. I don't like crumble. I'm probably a custard and rhubarb man, so I think rhubarb ice cream.
And maybe one of your trips should be to Wakefield in West Yorkshire, which of course is the Rhubarb Triangle.
Is it? Oh,
it is indeed.
I'll need to go to Wakefield, see the Trinity while I'm there.
Absolutely. And so, is there a place on Arran that's really close to your heart, or a place that you think, if you were coming to Arran, you must go there? Where would that be?
To me, the top of the Doon has got so many fond memories. Plus, my mother and father's ashes are both spread there.
Right.
When I was a young boy, I used to go up and sit and watch down onto the Shiskin golf course and look over to Drummadoon, which was my grandfather's farm. And I'm somebody that doesn't mind being on his own, and I quite like to be on my own and just contemplate and think.
Yes.
So that's a perfect spot for me.
Lovely. And I haven't been there yet, so that'll be on my list, top of the list. So, if you could play any part in either a film or a play, what would it be and why?
I think I'd like to play Darcy in Pride and Prejudice.
Oh.
I think the change in Darcy is just so complete from appearing arrogant. He's not arrogant, but he appears to be arrogant, and yet he's got a lot of love. And yes. I think I would like to play Darcy.
A very genuine character as well.
Yes.
He doesn't pretend to be something he isn't.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't suffer fools gladly.
No.
But I think that he shows in the end that love means more to him than all his position and everything else. So I'd like to play Darcy. Too old though.
Well, I don't know. I mean, on Islanders Reveal All, I mean, I could imagine you coming out of that lake with your shirt wet, so I'm up for that.
If they do excel.
Yeah. Dear me. So, just staying on that sort of theme, is there any book that you wish you had written?
Well, Pride and Prejudice, yes. I wish I'd written that. But one from my school was Prester John, which is John Buchan, which is a fabulous book as well.
Right.
And I learned so much about 19th century South Africa and the things. It's an excellent book.
I think
I tend to, Scottish noir is what I read most of the time now, but I intersperse it with the odd book. I finally caught up with Lady Chatterley's Lover, which is actually a fascinating book. It's not a dirty book. By our standards today, and I thought the characters were well written. I like something where you believe in the characters.
Yes, and I think a lot of the writing from the last century was very believable. And this is the style of writing, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So, given your shisky disky and background role as a DJ, what would be your ultimate guitar song? Your air guitar song, that is.
My air guitar song would probably be something by Status Quo, because probably Caroline.
Brilliant.
Which is it's got that. Yeah, I think Caroline.
Have you seen them live?
I haven't seen them live.
I did in Sheffield many years ago. Yeah. Brilliant.
One of my biggest regret was my mother wouldn't let me go and see the Small Faces at Paisley Ice Rink. And later in life, when I was in West Sound one day, Stevie Marriott came in and I got his autograph, and sadly he died in a fire a year later. But I loved the Small Faces, I thought. Oh,
fantastic. So, if you could have been born someone else, who would it be and why is that?
I'm going to bounce this back at you a bit, because I'm happy being me. I don't think I want to be anybody else. I'm a very lucky man. I've had a very good life. I've got very few regrets. And I've managed to bring up a family in a beautiful island like Arran. So no, I'm happy being me.
That's a brilliant answer. I don't think I've quite got to that point, but I think I'd like to be in the same position as you.
It's a good position to be in.
So, just on a final note, can you tell me one thing about yourself that people were really surprised to learn about you?
Probably that I'm very shy and I like to be quiet. At home I rarely talk, but I have a hatred of silences when I'm in company. I have to fill that silence, and folk think because of that I'm really chatty and ostentatious and outgoing, but I'm actually not. I'm nothing better, as I said, than sitting on top of the dune in silence, listening to the birds.
And it's interesting because people who are shy often will fill the silence because they don't want to be exposed as shy. So it's actually often easier to ask somebody a question or to tell a joke or a bit of a story.
Be the joker. And my father actually was an incredibly shy boy. He went to Glasgow University at the age of 17 and he used to hide in the toilets at lunchtime because he was scared to talk to people. Now this is a man whose career took him to the ministry, where he was talking to people all the time and talking at Burns suppers. But he never actually shook off the shyness. He was a very, very shyer than I am.
Wow.
And when I watch television videos of my father, I can see his eyes. He's alert when he's being interviewed because it's an act.
Yes.
And I think probably I do that as well.
Well, you certainly don't come across as shy, I have to say, but in a good way. So just on one final question, I feel like I'm going back to farming again, but what's your take on Jeremy Clarkson kicking off with this 1,000-acre farm he's got in the Cotswolds? What kind of a farmer do you think he'll make?
I think he'll make a good television presenter for a farmer, because he will play to the camera, there's no doubt about that. But if he has a love of the farm, then probably that'll come across. When you see folk like the presenter of the One Show, Matt Baker.
Well, he's finished now, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's now gone back to work in the farm because his mother has dementia,
Right.
And he's back working the farm, and he has a love of that. And also the presenter on Countryfile, he's got a great love of animals. His father was in television with it as well, but he takes rare breeds and he keeps them going and things like that. Now that's somebody that really loves farming.
Yes.
And I will hold judgment on Mr. Clarkson, because I didn't really like him very much, but I thought he did mastermind really well.
And he might have a better appreciation for the countryside going forward if he does do a show like this, rather than just racing cars around it.
He probably shares my view of cyclists as well.
And caravans?
And caravans.
Well, on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Over the months ahead, Charles and I will be in conversation with other islanders, prepared to let us see what makes them tick. Subscribe to the R&I channel to receive notifications of further episodes. We are grateful to Aaron Online for sponsoring this episode of Islanders Reveal All. The app is really helpful to everyone, showing the opening times of island businesses as well as providing directions to visitors. If you haven't already, download the free app today. You'll find a link to aarononline.com down below this video. Bye for now.